advice is really just be very long-term oriented and find other people that are long-term oriented. I think it gets really dangerous when people surround themselves that are kind of getting caught in the frenzy. You know, we've really been very intentional about the culture we've built at Foundation. It's not a, it's not a get rich quick scheme. It's not a trading venue. It's really like people there understand that we're building tools for artists and curators and collectors, that digital art is a fundamental, part of the art landscape now. It's probably going to be the fastest growing part of the art landscape. We're committed to that, right? And the market's going to go up and it's going to go down, but every couple of years, you'll see the market just be much bigger.
Hello, Kayvon.
Hi, Callum. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for being here. Super, super excited to get to know you and understand a bit more of what you guys are building on Foundation, which is, by the way, one of my favorite platforms when we think about user experience and all the features. I mean, the base of features that you are developing for artists and creators. Now incorporating a couple of things that we'll discuss. So super happy to have you in the show. Um, so Kayvon, I think a good place to start is with your background. I think you have been doing many things before Foundation in the tech world. So can you tell us a bit about that? How a bit about your background and how you got into Web3 and art?
Okay, well, Callum, thank you for having me. Thank you for the kind words. We put a lot of effort and care into the user experience. So whenever someone, really appreciates it, especially someone as sophisticated as yourself, I really do appreciate that because, it doesn't come easily to build something like that. It takes a lot of effort, on our end. And so thank you. In terms of background, it depends on how far back you want to go. But I started building, websites kind of during the first .com boom. That go all the way back then. I was just a teenager, mostly in high school, and that's how I kind of got my start in programming. I ended up, working at Google, later on after college, and I think that's where I really kind of saw the scale and impact that you can have by building on the internet, and that kind of pushed me to want to kind of consistently be on the frontier of technology, to kind of also become an entrepreneur myself. And so, eventually I realized Google was not the right place to be if you were really wanting to be entrepreneurial. You needed to go into startups. And so I joined a startup called Universe, after that. And we really, had this big audacious goal of trying to allow people to create with their iPhones. Prior iPhones and mobile phones were really understood as a consumption device. You would consume on it. And, it turned out to be the computer that most people had. And so we weren't satisfied with people being in a consumptive experience. We wanted them to also be in creative experiences, right? Computers are really, they're very empowering, right? So they amplify the human mind. And so how do we use the iPhone to challenge people to build stuff on the iPhone? And so Universe became a website builder. It let anyone with their with their phone be able to build websites. This really kind of easy to use but fun and interactive creative tool. And then really what I realized when building that was, well, one, I really enjoyed building something from scratch. It was very challenging. You had to really own, a lot of problems that if you're at a bigger company, you don't even think about. How do you bring something to market? How do you grow your user base? How do you iterate? How do you hire? These were all these things that I had previously not appreciated. And then I realized though that even the mobile space wasn't something that I think was experimental enough. I wanted to push myself to be even more on the frontier. And so I kind of ended up leaving. If Google was the web, and Universe I worked at on mobile, I pushed myself to go into kind of blockchains. And I think when Ethereum particularly started to gain traction and adoption and kind of awareness, the DAO hack and, sort of the events in Ethereum, they pulled my attention. And this idea that there's a new programming environment, right? And it's built on this kind of shared computer that anyone can kind of plug into, and it's their shared resources. It was all these very new ideas, and I was very captivated by that. And so I ended up getting involved um, with Nadav, who started Dharma, and we ended up working on a lending product, which was, I think, a really good use case at the beginning of trying to build programs and applications on blockchains, because if blockchains give you money and value, you can start to program financial services on top of them. And so, um, I found that as a pretty exciting first entry into the Web3 space. One of the first projects I worked on was kind of collateralizing a CryptoKitty NFT and trying to create a loan against it. This is in 2017, 2018, so it's really still very, very early. Um, and then by the end of 2019, um, it was the last bear market. I really realized that financial applications make a lot of sense, and I was really happy to have worked on it. But it wasn't something I was passionate about, in the sense that I really wanted to go back to this idea of creating creator tools and challenging people to be creative and using technology to be creative. And so that's actually the beginning of Foundation, right? So the way we saw it is that there was a real new platform being built that would empower creators in new ways, and nobody was doing it the way that we thought we could. And I think you've called out like kind of our attention to detail and user experience, but we really felt like something beautifully designed and really carefully crafted for artists, right, to use and to kind of empower them. That's the idea, and we really started at a very high level. And then we just, over the course of 2020, built something that, and figured out how to build something that artists really wanted to use. And then I think the rest is history.
Yeah.
With 2021 being a very kind of wild year, where people really realized, wow, there is this new powerful medium. Blockchains are something that they're not just for very technical people or for financial people, that artists and collectors and creators and creative people can use this new medium to really support themselves on the internet. So, that's really my personal story and personal journey, and I hope you can see how different experiences got me to the point where Foundation made sense, and I was able to
Yeah.
connect ideas that previously hadn't been connected.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Especially from what you mentioned, universe. That's kind of a similar use case, right? For creators, it wasn't related to blockchain, but I can see how you were, experimenting with, as you said, tools that let people create stuff, right? So yeah, I remember. I mean, in 2021, that was. I mean, I got into crypto earlier, but into Ethereum and NFTs, it was early in 2021, and I remember Foundation was. Um, I mean, everybody wanted to be on Foundation, and you had this invitation system, which I think was very very interesting because it wasn't that hard to get into Foundation, but you still needed somebody to invite you, either an artist friend or a collector. um, can you tell us a bit about that system, that in the early days, why did you build this invitation system, and what were some of the the let's say the positive, uh, the conclusion of that system? Did it help to attract the right creators to the platform? What was the experience with that?
Yeah, Callow, you're bringing me back, because I actually haven't talked. This feels like ancient history to me now, because it's we got rid of this system in early 2022. Um, for us, we were a very small team, so we were about 7 people when we launched, and so I think the invite system was out of necessity, because we there was just an enormous amount of demand to get onto the product. The launch had been quite successful. I think NFTs were becoming more and more, you know, relevant in the broader mainstream. And so, we were one of the platforms that really took off during that time. And so for us, it was really out of necessity. And we had two reasons, right? We wanted to give our engineering team the ability to build the system up so that we could offer a good user experience, and that needed to happen gradually. And then two, I also think there was a lot of education that needed to happen for people to be successful and to learn how to use the tools, and we couldn't do that all ourselves. And so really what we leaned on was a very decentralized kind of community approach where we onboarded and really helped the first 50 100 people learn about wallets, get set up, learn about transactions and the blockchain, right? And then from there we really leaned on the community to do that. And I think you asked, like, did it bring the right people in? And I would tell you absolutely. I don't think there's a more vibrant artist community than on Foundation, right? We were able to get a very strong network, you know, because you had to have that connection to the person. We really were able to onboard a lot of excellent people in a
Mhm.
very short amount of time. And so that was you know it wasn't what we didn't know that was going to happen necessarily, because again we did it out of necessity. But it was a very decentralized approach to building kind of a curated sense of
Mhm.
community. And then I think,
Yeah.
Kahlo, it kind of maps to, and we'll probably get into this in the later parts of the conversation, but it maps to our more recent products, right? Which is
Yeah.
we've really wanted to continue to, we've always understood the value of curation and bringing curated work and curated um, contexts as a way to really help people focus and for collectors to know what's high value or high signal. And so that was something that was really important to us, and we've continued to build products towards that aim.
Yeah, exactly. That was my follow-up question, more of a, I think, more recent feature, which I'm very, very excited about because there aren't, um, you mentioned worlds, right? Which is, I'll let you explain what worlds is, but basically it's a way for curators, right? To yeah, curate shows, curate exhibitions. And you mentioned that curation is important. Can you tell us why you decided to build worlds, and why is that important for collectors, but also for artists?
We really wanted to focus on curation as our core value prop. So, you mentioned the invite system, and why that came about. Well, it was because we had a strong desire to build curated context. And so the reason why we built Worlds is eventually the invite system that you mentioned. Well, that wasn't designed for curation. That was really just an onboarding mechanism. And at some point, it became so widespread that it wasn't really doing any sort of real justice to the community, right? And so we eventually got rid of it. It wasn't something that was built on the blockchain itself, right? So it didn't have any provenance or history attached to it that could be recorded on the blockchain. It was really just something that lived in our database. And so when we really came to the table and said, we still care about this, right? We still want these curated contexts. Well, we asked ourselves, how do we build a tool that lets anyone do that? And how do we ensure that the provenance and history of it belongs on the blockchain, right? And that's kind of the origins of Worlds, which was, we want collectors to be able to come into context where someone's really put attention to detail and thought about who should be in this world and what work should be sold and how it should be presented. And I think you've seen collectors really respond to those environments, right? I think it's like, as Web3's exploded, there's so many things going on at all times. How do you know where to focus? Why? Like, right?
Yeah.
And so building, curated context where the work is really explicitly being curated and a story being told, and there's very specific people involved. And then moreover, and I think, this is a part that's probably underappreciated and it'll take time for it to be appreciated, is the provenance, the history, the activity is all happening on the blockchain, right? So it's not this kind of like superficial skin or Web2 feature. It's something that's being baked into the actual NFTs and the presentation itself, and it's all recorded on the blockchain. I think that's really important to us.
Yeah, I can see how provenance will be. So for me, for example, um, when I try to research, right, and write articles or talk to other collectors, it can be very, very hard to navigate through the noise, right? And I
Yes.
can see how provenance and worlds are basically built for that, to navigate through the noise. But also, if you look back five, if you look into the future, people that are new in the space in 5 years, 8 years, and they want to understand the history, that's the best tool possible, right? Because it's on the blockchain. It could be visualized in many different ways, and so I can see how for historians, right, which is a very, when we think about art, it's a very important career, historians and curators. Um, so these people that are actually telling the stories, I can see how worlds can help with that. And can you tell us a bit about moments and the curation fees? How does words actually work? Can you bring on any kind of artist, or you need to talk to them previously and kind of coordinate, and they need to be on board into your world? How does it work exactly?
It depends on what layer you're talking about. At the blockchain layer, the world itself is an NFT. So it's something that the creator of the world owns and controls. That's a new feature that we've recently released. So it's an actual kind of like, native Web3 object that's in the possession of the creator. And then they basically have an ability to invite people that have the ability to sell or list work in the world, right? So you're curating kind of artists, and then those artists, right, once they're granted permission to kind of be part of the world, and again, all of this is on chain, right? So it's a very Web3 native technology. They can come in and they can list work in the world, right? And then the curator is able to bring those together into exhibitions, right? And we call that moments, right? But that's
Mm-hmm.
really just bringing the work together on a cohesive page where you can tell a story, present it, create a moment in time where people can kind of come and really focus on what's being presented to them. And then I think another important aspect of this is the curator is able to charge for this, right? So they're part of the primary sale. And I think that's really important because if we want more people to come in and do this work meaningfully, right? And if you look at the traditional world, like there's plenty of galleries and art dealers and people in that context that come in and offer the service and help build markets and build up artist reputations. Um, they need to charge a fee, right? They need to be able to charge for their work. And so I think that's an important thing that we did. And I think this is where at the blockchain layer, we're doing all of this work for the curator, right? So that they can just do what they do best, which is really working with the artist, getting the work positioned, talking to collectors, marketing and branding it. This is the work that I think they do. And then we handle and make sure that it's just very effortless to get people paid. Artist gets paid, curator gets paid, collector gets the work. It's all done through smart contracts. It's all very high integrity. And it makes it really, powerful. And the way we think about it is, you know, curators now need strong Web3 on chain tools, right, to do their work and to build the ecosystem into something much more resilient, much larger than what we saw in 2021.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes the job much easier. I have a gallery called the Blind Gallery,
Yes,
which
yes.
runs on the Tesos blockchain, and yeah, what you're mentioning is just makes the job much easier because we for the gallery we build our own contracts. Sometimes we integrate with other marketplaces, but the when we build our own contracts, we are a bit scared. Right? It can be dangerous. What if somebody hacks us, right? Or
Yep.
what if we messed up the royalties it's on the blockchain, right? So it's very hard to change it. So this way, it's a tool that has been tested and can be used at a high scale. And you mentioned our dealers and galleries, and I've seen already multiple galleries creating worlds, and you have this team feature, right? That kind of give control to different team members. So, do you see worlds with So the question, I guess, is the traditional art market is huge, right? And there are so many galleries in the world. Do you see them kind of using worlds? Is that something that you are excited about? You are looking to onboard traditional galleries, or is it more like a more for digital native, professionals, art professionals?
Well, I think, Carlo, it depends on how you think about the space evolving. Um, and I would maybe even turn the question around and ask you, because I don't know. I mean, the way I think about it is the product is designed for people that are crypto native, right? So you need to have a wallet. You need to know how to use, you need to know how to receive payment in ETH. You need to know how to submit transactions.
Yeah,
It puts the provenance on chain. It's decentralized. You own it, control it. So for us, those are the value propositions that we're focused on, right? Um, and I think whenever I hear the word traditional, honestly, I don't get excited, because, if you're going to be a traditional gallery, then I don't think any of these things are going to matter to you. And I don't know why you wouldn't stay being a traditional gallery. Now, that being said, I think digital art is probably going to be the most dynamic, fast growing, lucrative part of the art market for the foreseeable future. And so, do I think that many traditional galleries will become modern and
mm,
develop digital art, components to their business? I would hope so. Um, but in terms of what we're focused on, and really where we go, is we're focused on people that are native to the technology. Um,
right.
if you spend too much time thinking about all the ways in which you have to accommodate, old methods, you end up not being able to focus on innovating, right? Because you can't
Right.
push the limits of what the platform can do. And so, my opinion is that digital art is probably the future of the art market. It's probably where all our growth and development will come from, and the innovation. And then I think that, many, many, many galleries, new ones, perhaps old ones, will evolve, but new ones will be created. And my hope is that, and not just hope, but my belief is that they'll be built using very strong technology. And I think, what we offer in Worlds is a really powerful, it's a really powerful tool, right, for these
Yeah.
types of people. And I also think, Carlo, like, it's really important for the space to evolve. I think we all saw this in 2021, but, you know the space felt, immature, right? Like, it didn't have it was a little bit boom and bust. And
Mm,
people, there was a lot of artists that were very talented that had no support mechanisms. And I think, creating art and selling art are very different things. Some artists want to do that work, and should do that work if they can, and they're empowered to. And on Foundation, you can sell directly, and most artists do. But what we want to really create is another layer to the ecosystem where, selling art and selling work is its own business, right?
yeah.
And people that want to do that and are good at that can come in and have very powerful, on-chain tools to do that.
That's great way to put it, actually, because yeah, there is a lot of pressure, right, for artists to sell and do promote their work, and they many are not. They just hate to do that, and it's understandable, right? So it's great that now it's possible to have these sort of people that are actually looking to sell. That's what they like, and they can take artists on their worlds and help them to get people to see their work. So I think it's a great feature. But I would like to talk now about another one that you recently announced, and I'm very excited about as well, which is the partnership with Highlight to
Yep.
provide generative art, right? So generative coded art on Foundation. Can you tell us a bit about this partnership and what it will let people do on Foundation?
Yes. So our partnership with Highlight, yeah, is exciting. I'm glad you're calling it out. It's going to allow creators to bring their highlight collections onto Foundation. And then, specifically, just related to what we talked about, Carlo, is specifically work with curators, right? To have those collections be sold in Worlds. So collectors will be able to come and actually mint from these generative collections. So, the generative minting is going to go through highlight systems. There's a lot of technology that goes into generative minting, right? The algorithm is
Yeah.
producing the work in real time, and every collector is generating a unique piece, and it's going into the collectors providing data into the algorithm to generate the piece. It's all very compelling, and I think for us, and I think Carlo, you probably know this, is like you know generative art is a very rich part of the digital art landscape now. And I also think it's one where there's been very strong kind of curatorial brands and kind of um, galleries built, right? And so what we're hoping to see, and I think what we believe is that I think generative art just performed phenomenally well throughout the bear market. um, I think there's an enormous signal in that, which is I think that generative art is clearly a medium that's very native to what's happening in Web3, and it's probably at the very earliest kind of stages of its explorations and possibilities. And so what we're really partnering with Highlight to do is I think they've done a phenomenal job of expanding the toolkit for generative artists. They're offering a lot of new ways to create generative art. They're making it more accessible. They're making it more powerful. They're making it more customizable. We're excited about that. And then what we want to see happen is for those, experimental new ways of kind of creating generative art, we want to see them brought into new curatorial contexts. Right. So I think, you know, Art Blocks has done a phenomenal job, but I think that's just one model and kind of one vision of the world. Um, you know, through Worlds, I'd love to see there be hundreds of kind of visions of what excellent generative art looks like, and I think it'll bring a lot more diversity into the equation. I think it'll bring a lot more experimentation. I think we've already seen this with FX Hash on Tezos, right? Like every time you change and decentralize or expand the toolkit, you get much wider outputs.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited about that. And I also think generative art, a lot of people are already excited about it.
Yeah.
I think it's still early. I think I think it's still a very hardcore group of people that are into it. And I think more people are going to understand it and learn about it and find a passion and interest in it.
No, I totally agree. I'm actually a huge fan of generative art, and I agree in terms of feels like the early days. I think we have been, as you said, kind of been following a framework, but it's changing. It's changing fast in terms of the tools that artists can use to create their art. Now we see also explorations between coded art and AI art. And what I like about Worlds is that you can merge all these disciplines, right? Because if you think about art blocks or FX hash, it's hard for the community. So the community is really looking for coded art, right? And when we see some explorations like working with pre-render images, right, or this sort of collage that aren't purely coded art, we see some drawbacks, right? So I feel like Foundation could be this place where people explore different things in a world, right? You can have an AI artist, you can have a generative coded artist, so it really opens the door for more experimentation. um, I just mentioned AI art. So, what are your thoughts regarding AI art? I've seen many artists on Foundation, working with AI, and there are many very talented artists. What are your thoughts there, Kayvon?
So, I mean, I believe we have probably the largest community of AI artists in Web3. So I think the answer is obviously we're very excited. And I think, Callo, if there was one description that I'd want you to understand Foundation through is I think because the nature of our tooling is open and expansive and we're constantly pushing it forward, I think we attract also the artists that are in that mindset as well. And so I think you're aware of our drops tool,
Hmm.
but I think that's been the tool of choice for a lot of AI artists. Now, that's distinct from what Highlight offers, and I think what Highlight has is phenomenal because it allows for the coded work to be generated live. But for AI artists, they're often, not able to do that, right? they're not using a predetermined kind of algorithm. They're really using AI tools that have different properties. And so they've actually, as you mentioned, used kind of curated outputs is what we call it, right? Where they've
Yeah.
you know selected a set of imagery that they like out of their kind of AI tool, and they've used then drops to kind of release that. And so we have phenomenal AI artists. I think Claire Silver was one of the earliest that was established herself on Foundation. There was um, we have kind of also a new crop of constant innovators that are on the platform that are new. I don't know if you know Stefan Basement or Infinite Yay, or there's a lot of new names in the space that I think are just getting started. And so very excited about AI art. I think it's already on Foundation in a big way. I actually hadn't thought about it the way you had, which is, the powerful thing about where we're going once we support Highlight, which is going live next week, is you'll have AI art and generative art on the same platform.
Mm.
I think for
Yeah.
the first time in a big way. And I think that's our vision of Worlds, which I think is, we call it the product Worlds because we wanted people to have big visions and big dreams. And I think you know, Callow, I'd encourage you to run with this because I actually haven't heard someone really say this concretely, but yeah, doing an AI generative art kind of mixed mishmash, right? Where you're really kind of, demonstrating both mediums in parallel or in tandem. I mean, that sounds really interesting to me.
Right. Yeah, because from what I've seen is kind of collectors, they pay a lot of attention on the underlying technology, on where something is minted, right? So now, I mean, I also saw many artists doing generative art on Foundation, but it was more on the curated way, right? That they selected the outputs from their algorithm outside of Foundation, they minted that work. But now, as you said, they have both options. And yeah, it looks like a place where you can find AI art and also generative coded art properly on top of all the releases, the different mechanisms that you support, right? Like drops, or just minting a one-on-one. There is another one. So you have, is it series? So you have one-on-one drops, and there was something else.
We have
What is it?
additions as well.
Editions? Right, multiple
Yeah, I mean,
editions.
Callow, our vision is that the vision that we're marching towards is we want creators to have access to whatever tool they need to release their work, right? And we're really focused on any digital artist. And so we started with one of ones. um I think that's where most artists also start, and then we've expanded into editions. I think you're calling it series, but we call it drops. But
Sure.
those are just kind of long form series, right, where you take a group of kind of related images and you release work. We have that. And then now we're going to have generative series, right, where you're able to bring an algorithm, and you're able to show that. And then on top of all of that, you can talk to curators, right? And I know that I think you're interested in bringing your gallery to Foundation. We're really excited about that. You're an example of like you're going to be in the ecosystem. There's already hundreds of other curators. So you can start to see, the vision we have is this very rich ecosystem where all the tools are there, right? And this is not to mention also you can use our tools, you can use manifolds tools, you can use transients tools, you can use highlights tools. Those all work with Foundation. And then you can either do this all independently, right? But then what we've also learned is that artists really benefit from finding collaborators to get their, to really partner and market their work and curate the work and contextualize the work. And that's what's happening through Worlds. And so all of this is connected. All of this is happening on top of Foundation.
Yeah.
And we really think as we especially go into this kind of next cycle in the market, I think, what we hope and want to see happen is just the most decentralized but vibrant part of the digital art ecosystem is all on Foundation.
That sounds super exciting, Kayvon. And yeah, I'm looking into Worlds because, as I told you, running a gallery, only if you have like a huge team, it's a lot of work, right? Besides marketing and working with artists, the technology aspect can be can be very complex.
And I think you've said this now multiple times, but we make all of that as simple as possible,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly,
So
exactly.
what I hope, and Callow, I really hope that you have this ability to experience it yourself and help write and explain to others. But like, we go through a very rigorous design process and ask ourselves, is this the simplest version of what curators need? And is it clear and is it secure? So, everything we do is very secure. It's very simple. It's well designed, but then it's powerful, right? At the same time, and that's really what we're doing. And I'm with you. Like, I think that if we want lots of curators to come in and really elevate and uplift this digital art system we've built, they're going to need tools to do that work.
Yeah, definitely. No, super, super exciting, Kayvon. I'm really looking forward to trying this new set of features. And yeah, really impressive how you keep developing new things. And that takes me to two questions, which, you know, are one is, I mean, it's kind of a fact that the gas, right? Gas on Ethereum, which can be expensive at times, but also during the bull markets, right? We saw crazy expensive gas fees, and now we have seen how, for example, Highlight, they have this option to use an L2, which reduces gas tremendously for artists and for collectors. So I wonder, what are your thoughts there in terms of L2s and reducing gas for artists and collectors? How do you see the whole thing evolving in the future? Do you think more people and mainstream adoption will happen on Ethereum on the main layer, or you think it will go to an L2 like Base or Polygon or one of those Optimism? There are so many now. How do you approach L2s?
That's a good question. So I think it's something that I think is very dynamic, Callow. So like, my answer probably will need to change on a very regular basis. But I think for us, you need to understand what is what is happening on these chains, right? And I think for us, we're focused on digital art, and I think provenance is really important for digital art. And I think the most valuable digital art will still be minted on Ethereum itself. Um,
Hmm.
and I think when we look at what we really care about in this space, it's ensuring that part of the market is being served, and we're a part of it. That's our origins, and I think that's where we really, also just care to make sure that the right thing is happening, and we've always been a very important player. I think L2s are important and they matter. I think of them as more of an experimental playgrounds right now. Um, and I think they're an excellent outlet, and they push a lot of the experimentation, to their areas, and that I think that allows artists and curators and collectors and everybody to participate. Um, and I'm excited about that. Right, I love seeing that. In terms of where we're focused right now, it's not a priority for us in the immediate moment. Um,
Hmm.
it's something that I think is still, you mentioned a bunch of, there's a lot of different options out there. I think it can be a little confusing, and um, I think we will get to the point where we really want to invest in this area. But for now, we still think the digital art community, especially for the work that we're wanting to see people kind of release and sell on Foundation, is more on the higher end. And so I think, that looks like using Ethereum for now.
Yeah. No, I agree. And also there is a thing about Ethereum and paying gas. Um, it's it's kind of, yeah, it's more like a premium, right? Like a premium blockchain. So if you're willing, if an artist is willing to, pay gas, an expensive amount, it means that he's really putting effort into his art, into building his career. And then I think collectors also appreciate that, right? And yeah, I feel like the gas has made the Ethereum in a way kind of filter a bit of the noise, thanks to the gas system. Of course, there are times I remember, crazy high gas prices. I think that's not ideal, but having certain amount of gas is it's not the end of the world. But yeah, I agree that at some point there needs to be something happening, but probably it's a few years down the road in terms of L2s. And another question I have, Kayvon, and I think I saw a tweet from you in your timeline. So it's related to Elon Musk when he was I think at Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was mocking NFTs that these images are not even in the blockchain, and like they point to an external server, and but at the same time, I think you pointed out that some are in the blockchain, right? And when we look at the generative coded art, some of it is in the blockchain, but also all these systems that power um, these NFTs are decentralized, right? So, what are your thoughts on on kind of the debate of JPEGs being on the blockchain or not? Do you think they should be? You think it doesn't matter? How does Foundation approach this debate?
So, I mean, there are issues in the space where people like, if we're discussing, the idea of storing the image on a private server, that is completely problematic and I do not support it. So that's one extreme, right? And I
Mhm.
think that, Elon or whoever is right to call out that that makes no sense. Like, what are you doing and why? Like, the token might be on the blockchain, but if what represent of what if what the token is actually mapping to is just on a private server, that's not going to stand the
Mhm.
test of time. And yes, it's probably useless. On the other end, I also think that people that are rushing to say, well, then everything has to be on the Ethereum blockchain, that doesn't make sense either.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, the Ethereum blockchain is not a storage network. It is not designed to store assets and heavy media and provide storage guarantees for that media. And so I just think that the space is learning how to talk about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I would encourage people to understand the technology and to have an opinion, but then it's these extremes of it all has to be on the Ethereum blockchain doesn't make sense. I know there are people that like to explore that as a way of expressing the work, and that's fine. That makes a ton of sense to me. Um, but for a lot of media, that's not going to make sense. And then on the other end, it's completely unacceptable to sell an NFT and have the underlying asset in a private
Yeah.
server. And my hope, Callow, is like I don't even think this debate is that relevant. I think a lot of the players that were making that mistake are long gone or have changed their ways in terms of where the
Mhm.
images reside. I mean, Foundation has always used IPFS since we launched, right? Um, and I think that's incredibly important. And then I think, on top of that, we're getting into generative art, and I think one of the things that we actually really like, Kylo, is that Highlight took a much more flexible approach. I think a lot of people in the generative art community, understand the technology and understand the dependencies. But I think I really like how Highlight approached it, which is, if you want more experimentation and flexibility with the tooling, Ethereum isn't designed to be a storage layer, right? You can only have, very limited amounts of storage in a smart contract. And so they've really pushed to use Arweave and kind of other decentralized storage layers to kind of amplify what they're doing. And I think
Mhm.
that's very powerful. I mean, and I think it's going to really allow the generative art space to expand and find new kind of, find new interesting ways to express the medium.
Yeah, that's the case of FX Hash on Tezos, right? So it's not on the blockchain, and then artists have much more flexibility, right, in terms of size and storage capacities, the libraries they can use, and so that opened the door for a lot of things that couldn't have been done on something like art blocks, which is on the blockchain. Everything has to be on the blockchain. So that's an interesting proposition. And okay, but I think it's amazing everything you have been mentioning and the vision of Foundation. But I would like to maybe look forward right into the future because Foundation. I think the slogan is the foundation of Web3, right? And I think the mission is to empower creators And so far, I think most of the creators on Foundation are artists, right? It's kind of what we call art. But there are many more things that can be done on chain, right? There are many kinds of creators like musicians, podcasters, writers, so many things. And I wonder, how do you see the future of Foundation? Do you think you will at some point start to tackle those areas, or you see it completely focus on art, or it will depend on the demand? What are your thoughts there on the kinds of creations that will be supported by Foundation?
I mean, I think it's important, Callow, that you're focused. I think, and you mentioned these other types of creators, and I think the thing I would just say is, you're right to call out that I think Web3 will support lots of types of creators. I think for us, we're really focused on digital art. Um, I think there are other platforms out there that are focused on music and writing, and it's not to say that we wouldn't be interested in supporting them maybe at some point, or
Hmm.
I will say a lot of musicians are also visual artists, but
Yeah.
I think for us, there's two things, which is I think you need to focus. I think if we go build products that are really generalized, you end up not really building something powerful and really kind of specific that helps somebody. It helps nobody. Um, and then I also think digital art is the medium that I think has product market fit with Web3 and blockchain. So I think some of these other areas are still being explored and they still are being understood. And I think for us, I mean, the reason why, Kala, we're getting into generative art is like we are expanding what's happening on Foundation, but we're expanding where we think digital art is going, right, and the future of digital art. And so I think your discussion of AI and generative art, I mean, that's where I think we really get excited because we see artists really using those tools. Um, these other areas that you mentioned, like gaming or what have you, it's like
Yeah.
foundation. If the tools work for you and you're excited to do something with us, that's great. But I also think like we want to be focused, right? And I think for us, we're focused on digital art, um, and that'll probably be true for the foreseeable future.
No, that makes total sense. I'm also, you see a possibility there, um, but that's also not something that I see the it's way different, right? To mint a podcast episode or an article, right? And the collectors are completely different from that kind of um, yeah elements. And also, as you said, product market fit isn't there for these other areas at least yet. And yeah, that word, that phrase, it kind of reminds me that you are an entrepreneur, right? And you have been through a lot with Foundation and Web3. And I cannot, you know, leave the show without asking you what are some. I mean, first the challenges, the biggest challenges for a founder in this space, in the Web3 space, blockchain space, and also advice. What advice would you give founders and creators, somebody that maybe is like you that wants to build tools for creators in the blockchain?
I think the hardest, the hardest part about operating in the Web3 space is how cyclical it is. Um, because, and I'll describe my journey a little bit, which is, 2020, we start the company and nobody really cares, right? Artists are not that interested in using the blockchain, and it's pretty, um, we're really out there, on the frontier, and not a lot of people are interested. All of a sudden, 2021, everybody's interested, right? And it's complete kind of chaos, and there's a lot of impatience and frustration, and desire to kind of just get rich quick. And then
Mm.
and then obviously we go back to then, once the market kind of calms down, lots of people leave, and it's kind of everyone gets dejected again, and they're less interested. And I think, like, to be an entrepreneur in this space is really to kind of step away from these sort of cyclical movements and be long term focused. And so I think it doesn't really matter if you're an entrepreneur, a creator, a collector, any of these archetypes. You have to go, if you're going to be successful, you're going to have a long term vision for what you're doing, because
Yeah.
you can't time the market. The market's going to go up, the market's going to go down. It's not it's really not signal in any way that's giving you like kind of grounding. Like people thought they were geniuses, 2 years ago, and now they think they're total failures, and
Mm.
that's too volatile to kind of make progress. So, my advice is, I think, building during the bear market's probably the best time.
Mm.
Um, it's really where you're going to connect with what you're trying to do and really understand it and be very disciplined about it. And then during the bull, it's like you also have to be disciplined in a different way, which is, probably things are going to happen that you actually had very little to do with, and you can't get too confident or
Mm.
too arrogant. It'll really kind of come back to bite you. So that's really the challenge, I think, of working in the space. And then if my advice is really just be very long term oriented and find other people that are long term oriented. I think it gets really dangerous when people surround themselves that are kind of getting caught in the frenzy. You know,
Mm.
we've really been very intentional about the culture we've built at Foundation. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's not a trading venue. It's really like people there understand that we're building tools for artists and curators and collectors. That digital art is a fundamental, part of the art landscape now. It's probably going to be the fastest growing part of the art landscape. And um, we're committed to that, right? And the market's going to go up and it's going to go down, but every year, every couple of years, you'll see the market just be much bigger. And Cal, I'll remind you, is like when I first started the company, I think like less than $1 million of digital art was sold, right? So
Yeah.
there really was no market to begin with, and so people often now say we're in a bear market, but that market's like 100 times bigger than what was there originally. And so I think that's going to be
Yeah.
true in the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years.
Yeah. No, that's I mean, great advice. I think it applies, as you said, not only for founders, also for artists and collectors, as you said. So
Not just for entrepreneurs, it's also
yeah.
for, you know, I think of artists and curators and, even yourself, Kalo, like, with the gallery and everything, like, yeah, this is the advice I'd give to you, which is you can't just start the gallery and expect it to work right away.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time to build relationships and credibility and build an eye, and these things they're not overnight.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic feedback. And Kayvon, we have been talking almost for an hour, and I'd like to ask all the guests in the podcast who are three artists that inspire you. I know you are in a tough position because you see a lot of art, a lot of artists. But yeah, I would love to hear three names of artists that inspire you.
Oof, that's very challenging. That's very challenging because I really do see a lot. I don't know if I would limit it to three, and I wouldn't want people to think that these three are the only three, because I actually, you're right, Cal. Like a pretty I'm pretty privileged in that I'm seeing hundreds of artists all the time and watching them. But Jeremy Booth is somebody that I have enormous respect for, just in how innovative he's been in the space, and really kind of, also now building Western Art Department, which is a world on Foundation that I have a lot of respect for, right? Not just building his own career, but getting other artists the support they need. I've always respected that. Um, there's Yatreda from Ethiopia. Kia has done an amazing job, um, building something from scratch, right? Using the technology natively from day one, and really building something for herself. She's always really, really impressed me. And then, you know, um, Zack Lieberman is really just an OG digital artist, very early to Foundation, one of the first 50 artists we onboarded. And I just think that he's really gone on to, generative art now is all the rage, but I think, a lot of these people that are OGs that have been doing this for decades prior, I mean, they always deserved their flowers because, they didn't just come in and chase a market, right?
Hmm.
Zach's been
Yeah.
doing deep work in this field for decades, and so again, I want to call out that Callow, like, I don't. It's not these artists in
Yeah.
it's not just these are my three artists. I'm actually just trying to pick out people that I think have really exemplified values that we're excited about. So like, with Jeremy, it's like being dedicated to the space, but then also building venues and thinking about the broader community. And like, he's been able to build Western art into a whole category in Web3. He deserves a lot of respect for that. I think Kia and Yatreda coming in, from Ethiopia, building something from scratch, you know, building something very Web3 native that's kind of very deeply powerful, like, preserving Ethiopian lore and history on the blockchain, very powerful. Um, and then I think people like Zack that have just been in the digital art space for decades prior and,
Yeah.
evolving with the space, embracing the technology, but bringing their craft and years of experience. I think a lot of people come in and are very, very short sighted. They're very impatient. If you think about the people that are really succeeding, these are people that have been pushing themselves for a long time. So, people like Zack really deserve
Yeah.
a lot of credit. So, that's my point, which is I could go on and on. I really an amazing part of my job is the fact that I'm exposed to and get to interact with so many artists and members of the community, and I could give you even more even more names. I could go on and on and on, but those are three that kind of highlight really interesting
Yeah.
values to me.
No, those are great names. Actually, Zach, I had the chance to listen to him in a talk in Mexico City, and you're right. He the way how he explains his craft and his career, and he was mentioning how he got started, how he received early support. Actually, in Madrid, here in Spain, from an institution that allowed him to, you know, continue to explore without focusing so much on the sales. And he recently had a couple of some advice for artists, right, to find ways to continue to experiment and not only go into a framework, right, like releasing generative art, and that's the only. I mean, releasing generative art, yes, but not only like this framework of 100, 200 automatic pieces, right, to explore different things, uh, build communities, do help others through teaching, right, create courses to help other artists, and so he had a very very interesting point of view. And what about worlds that inspire you, Kayvon? I know it's there will be many many more worlds coming, but for those listeners that are interested in exploring worlds, what are some of the best worlds out there on Foundation already?
Well, I mentioned this before, but I think Western Art Department has done a phenomenal job bringing together really like a community, right? Building a genre within Web3, building that community, bringing wonderful work together. I think Western Art Department's amazing. Um, my hope is that people are excited about Forever Projects. Forever Projects is a gallery that we've built at Foundation ourselves. So we're using the
Mhm.
product just as anyone else would. And we've been doing a lot of releases through Forever. And then um, I think from there's just a lot of different community initiatives. I mean, I think what Space World has been able to do has been really wonderful. I think GM World has been able to take a lot of up and coming artists and create a space for them and really be very well curated. Super Chief is out there kind of constantly bringing
Yeah.
people together IRL. So there's a lot to really appreciate out there, and it's really that I think that's the vision of Worlds, which is it really is meant to, you might not be into Western art, you might be into generative art, you might be into AI art. There's different worlds out there for all these different kind of categories, and then within them, there's just a lot of really great curation. So, those are the few that I'd highlight, but I'd really encourage people to go out there and explore which ones really kind of inspire them.
Awesome. Yeah, for everybody listening, all these worlds, artists, collections that we mentioned are in the will be in the podcast description of the show, so you can easily find all these links. And Kayvon, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time and for building this amazing tool set for artists, collectors, and curators. Thanks so much.
Yes, Callo, thank you.